revenue all the way through their trip around New Zealand.
There are a lot of people tripping around New Zealand, though, and Doc always seem to be at full stretch now, trying to keep us pristine. What about the idea of whether we want to be attracting more high-yield visitors, Chris, not just, a whole lot of young people on their gap years in camper vans? Do we have the right approach there?
Well, you've got to remember these backpackers, they stay a long time. The average German spends over 50 days in New Zealand. Many of them are also down here spending time picking fruit, for example, working in part-time jobs that are vital for those industries as well. And so their average overall spend can be higher than many of those so-called premium markets. Also, of course, if you capture someone when they're young, we can create an enduring connection to New Zealand, and they can come back many times during their lifetime. But clearly the issue of freedom camping and some of the stresses on locations like Tongariro Crossing and Cathedral Cove, we've got to address those. And frankly, it means more money, it means better management policies. And I think the tourism industry, we've got to do a much better job in advocating to the government that part of that $1 billion in GST needs to be reinvested back in these issues.
Okay, that's my last question, really. How would you reinvest it back to, you talk about sustainability issues, Chris. Where would you spend that money?
Well, we've got our major problem is seasonality. So we've got, tremendous growth pressures through the summer months, and then during the sort of shoulder season, the off-season, most parts of New Zealand would like more international visitors. So clearly we've got to do a much better job, I think, telling visitors about coming in the shoulder and off-season, the communication and marketing. Remember, Tourism New Zealand has over $120 million that they're spending, so that needs to be aligned with where we want people to go and when we want people to come. And they're doing some of that. Clearly, we also need to invest in additional infrastructure. Arguably, we need some sort of bed tax, for example, in key local district areas like Queenstown, where they've got tremendous needs and they've got limited ways to raise additional revenue.
Okay, so you support the idea of putting money into the local communities to help them deal with the surplus tourists?
Yeah, I mean, it's the old adage, isn't it, that when you're doing well, you've got to reinvest to ensure that we continue to do well.
Yeah. Chris Adams, thank you very much for joining us on the panel, all the way from Colorado. Jumping or running a red light can be a safety choice for a cyclist, says a texter. That's the other aspect of moving in traffic, isn't it? Cyclists, you could argue, legitimately want to get the jump on cars because they don't trust the driving of people and vehicles, so they want to be able to actually create space for themselves.
But they would do that at their own risk, I would think.
Yeah, I know. But it's probably what some of them are thinking. More cameras planned for the student quarter in Dunedin. Once again, we haven't allotted much time for this topic. It's happened yesterday. But this is to put an end to dangerous and anti-social activities like lighting fires, or as we heard about yesterday, scaring female students with aggressive behaviour. And here's the thing, 400 cameras are operated by the university, most of which monitor the insides of buildings, and others focus outward on public streets or campus walkways, and I think that's what they're going to have more of. Did you ever think we would live in an age where you go to a university and there'd be and it's probably the same with other universities, 400 cameras?
Brings new meaning to the idea of the walk of shame.
Good point. I think it sounds a bit ridiculous, but my understanding is that universities are private property, so they're allowed to do this, but then you're allowed as a student to perhaps choose to go to a different university.
Yeah, I suppose.
Pretty sure they didn't have any cameras on us at Massey.
What we began to talk about yesterday was women feeling unsafe on the streets of North Dunedin and the university's response being 2 education programs. Do you think educating students about not being threatening to women is going to work? Is this...
No, because the ones that don't want to be threatening know it anyway, and the ones that are doing it are being mean, rude words I can't say on the radio, so no, I don't think it's going to help.
All right, what do you think?
I thought that could be combined with a university-run security service where women could call and make complaints and get somebody to come over and deal with the situation.
Okay, they do have a proctor, of course, don't they? Jeremy Hansen, nice to have you back on the panel.
Nice to see you, Jim.
Alan Reid, you too.
Thank you.
As they both sail away, a nod to your latest hobby, and John Campbell's Checkpoint. Thanks, everybody.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell, and on behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, the 50-year-old woman who fell bound and gagged from the back of a car. We speak to a witness. Super Tuesday, Clinton and Trump have good days, but Sanders and Cruz stay in the race. We are live in the States. Ranginui Walker, Mihindarangi Forbes was at his tangi and she is with us to talk about the day, plus student debt, organ donation, wilding pines and sport. All of that and more in the next 90 minutes, but we begin with Leilani Mamoisia and RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The police have identified the woman who was seriously injured when she escaped from a moving car in Papatoetoe last night. They say she is a 50-year-old Thai woman who lives in Auckland. She remains in Middlemore Hospital in a critical condition. Residents saw the woman escape out of the car's boot, bleeding and with ties around her legs, arms and neck on Huia Road in Papatoetoe. One of them, Jay Shah, says he was putting his rubbish bins out when he saw the woman leap out of the car right near him.
I quickly tried to untie the knot of her tie because she was, from what I can see, she was not able to breathe. So I untied it, and by the time I got other people there helping me.
Papatoetoe resident Jay Shah. The police believe at least one suspect was in the silver sedan that was carrying the woman and which they are still looking for. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump is basking in a string of 5 Super Tuesday wins in primary contests and vows to beat Democratic rival Hillary Clinton in November's presidential election. With results from the day's voting still coming in, he's trying to lock down his party's White House nomination, and he insists he'll be able to unify the Republican Party. And he says he's gunning for Hillary Clinton.
I'm going to go after one person, that's Hillary Clinton, on the assumption she's allowed to run, which is a big assumption. I don't know that she's going to be allowed to run. And I think that's frankly going to be an easy race. You see the polls. I beat Hillary in many polls. I know one thing, I don't think Marco's going to be able to beat her. I don't think, in all fairness, I think Ted's going to have a very hard time.
Donald Trump has won in 6 states today. Hillary Clinton has also won in 6 states in the Democrats' contest. Hundreds of people have gathered at Orake Marae in Auckland to farewell the kaumatua and academic Ranginui Walker. Dr. Walker died on Monday, aged 83. Amongst those paying tribute is the former Māori Party leader, Peter Sharples, who was one of Dr. Walker's students.
I think his greatest gift was to be able to explain the ahua, the sort of what it was like to be colonised, and the actual things that colonised us, the events, the laws, the practices, the culture of tauiwi.
The former Māori Party leader, Peter Sharples. No one will be charged after a police officer shot and killed a man in an Auckland park last year. David Servin, who was 21, was shot in Myers Park in the central city one night in August. Kim Baker-Wilson reports.
Mr. Servin was being sought in relation to 3 robberies. The police said at the time he claimed to be armed and that they shot him after 20 minutes of negotiations. It was later revealed that he wasn't armed at all. In a statement today, the police say they consider the actions of officers at the park were justified. The coroner said last year the police had advised of communication they had with Mr. Servin beforehand, suggesting he wanted to die and he intended to make it happen. An investigation into police policies and procedures is ongoing. In Auckland, Kim Baker-Wilson.
A decision by the police not to prosecute TV3 staff over an illegal gun purchase is disappointing to the gun shop owner who was involved in the process. Gun City sold a firearm to a current affairs journalist, Heather Duplessis-Allen, who wanted to make a point about gun safety. The police say a forged document was used to obtain the weapon, but there was no evidence of any sinister motive, so 3 TV3 staffers have been issued with a warning. Gun City company owner David Tipple says this is wrong.
I'm really disappointed, but it was what I had expected right from the outset. That's why I suggested that I would need to run a private prosecution. I told the police my stance on it, and I have members of the public willing to start a call for funds to pay the costs.
Gun City company owner David Tipple. The bus company NZ Bus has been told to pay thousands of dollars for the way it dealt with drivers when setting new rosters. The Employment Relations Authority has ruled NZ Bus breached its obligations of good faith when it introduced new rosters. It's been ordered to give sufficient time for consultation to union members and has 28 days to pay $10,000 to the authority. First Union says the rosters allowed for drivers to work up to 11 hours a day with only a 10-hour break between shifts. And now to sports. The Perth Wildcats coach Trevor Gleeson has given the referees a timely reminder of the Breakers' foul troubles ahead of Game 1 of the Australian National Basketball League final in Perth tonight. The two sides have played one another 4 times this season, each side winning both of their home games. The Breakers are the most penalised team in the competition, and Gleeson says that that means they know what to expect. The match tips off at 11:30 tonight. The Blues will welcome back All Blacks flanker Jerome Kaino from suspension in one of 6 changes to the lineup that beat the Highlanders in round 1 for Friday night's match against the Crusaders in Christchurch. Renee Ranger will also start at centre. The New Zealand track cycling sprint team is upbeat about its chances of reclaiming the World Championship title in London tomorrow morning after their heartbreaking loss last year. The trio of Eddie Dawkins, Sam Webster and Ethan Mitchell crushed France in last year's final to defend their title, only to be relegated to second following a technical infraction. Dawkins says the team's times at the recent New Zealand Nationals were within a second or so of the London track record, and he's confident a slightly faster time will guarantee them a gold or silver medal champs. And that's the news.
Escape. She escaped from the back of a boot. Her hands were tied up, her legs were tied up, rope around her stomach, around her neck.
Taking on gangs.
It's a whānau by whānau, community by community approach, allowing that community to say what would help them and then getting in there and delivering those resources.
Under mea culpa.
I was wrong to use those words. I don't regard those people who came to Parliament yesterday as pawns.
Action and reaction. Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espin, a morning report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, is it time for superannuation to be means tested? The Retirement Commissioner is my guest. And after 10, from human mutants to the evolution of pop music, Professor of Evolutionary Developmental Biology Armand Lara on using science to understand life and culture. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after morning report on RNZ National.
And the Met Service weather till midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, long fine spells with a few light showers. Western areas from Waikato to Wellington, also Bay of Plenty and the Central High Countries, mainly fine, isolated showers about Taranaki tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay becoming fine tomorrow. Wairarapa, Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Canterbury and North Otago, fine but cloudy periods. Westland and Fiordland, patchy drizzle developing tomorrow, then turning to rain in Fiordland during the evening. Central Otago, Dunedin, Clutha and Southland, there's scattered rain developing late tomorrow afternoon or evening. Chatham Islands, it's cloudy periods, a few showers until the morning. And I'll be back at 5:30 with news headlines. It's 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Leilani. In a moment, Super Tuesday, a good day for Trump and Clinton, but Cruz and Sanders do enough to hang on. In fact, Sanders is closing strongly now, but we're going to begin with the woman who somehow fell, bound and gagged from the boot of a moving car in the Auckland suburb of Papatoetoe last night. Police have identified her as a 50-year-old Thai woman now living in Auckland. She remains in a critical condition in Middlemore Hospital. A Huia Road resident, Jay Shah, saw what happened.
So I was putting my bins in to my house when I saw this car pass by, and while I was just looking, and the boot opened up, and someone dropped out of it or leaped out of it, and my first instinct was to rush towards it. When I went there, I saw this lady. She was lying on the floor on the road on her back, and she was frothing in the mouth, and her legs and her hands were tied up, so they were not tightly tied up, they were loose, but of ropes around her, and she was bleeding from her nose, and there was a metal rod next to her. So my immediate reaction was that this is some kind of a kidnapping or something, where she's managed to break herself free. And there was a tie in her neck, which was tied in a knot, and a few other bits of cloth around the neck, which were in a knot as well. So I quickly tried to untie the knot of her tie because she was, from what I can see, she was not able to breathe. So I untied it, and by the time I got other people there helping me, and we started managing the traffic, and within a few minutes the ambulance came and took her in.
How absolutely terrifying. And so the car was getting along at a reasonable speed, Jay, from what you can remember?
Yes, it was. It wasn't too fast. It was on a normal speed.
And so, but she obviously forced herself somehow out of the boot and hit the road going presumably somewhere in the region of 30, 40, 50k, whatever. And so what were the extent of her injuries? How badly injured was she?
Well, so she was, I don't know whether the injury was caused because she leaped out of the boot of the car or whether it was inflicted by someone else. So from what I could gather, she had few scratches. Yeah, they were not bloody, but just scratches on her arm and the bleeding from her nose.
Jay,
and she was not able to talk either.
And what have you been able to tell the police? Have you been able to give them information about the type of car, the model, the colour, that kind of stuff?
So from what I remember, it was just a grey or a silver sedan. It wasn't a flash brand new sedan. It would be in its 2000s, but it wasn't too old or it wasn't too new either. But my concentration was not on the car.
Yeah, of course.
It was just on the lady.
That was Huia Road resident Jay Shah. Our police reporter Carla Penman has been working on this story and she is with us now in the studio. Carla, what can you tell us about the condition of this 50-year-old Thai woman, now an Auckland resident?
Well, we understand that she's still in a coma in the intensive care unit at Middlemore Hospital, where she has been since the incident unfolded on Huia Road at 7 o'clock last night. That's all we understand at the moment.
Okay. In terms of trying to find out whose car she was in, why she was there, who was driving it, what was going on, how much are the police saying about where they're at with their investigation?
Well, it appears the police don't have all that many leads at the moment. They're very open-minded as to how far this getaway car that she tumbled out of might be. Witnesses have had varying accounts of how many people were in the car, saying at least one, possibly two were in the car. And the police have also commended the efforts of one of the first people there at the scene who tried to chase the getaway car to get the registration number, but failed to do that. So police, as I say, are still keeping an open mind and don't really know what happened in the lead up to her having to fling herself in such a way, being bound and gagged, and people having to untie those and help her be able to breathe.
So this is very early days in the investigation at this stage from what the police are saying.
Yes, it certainly is, and I think we'll slowly find out more information as the police hopefully get more information from the public about sightings of this car, which is believed to be a late model silver sedan.
Carla Penman, thank you very much indeed, and if there is any further news on that during the course of Checkpoint this evening, we will of course bring it to you. Let's turn to Super Tuesday now, the biggest single day in the smash and grab that is America's primary calendar. More delegates are won on Super Tuesday than on any other day in the primary contests, and it's Trump and Clinton who've done best. The firecracker outsider for the Republicans and one of the most famous surnames in the history of the Liberal establishment for the Democrats. Biggest loser, probably Republican aspirant Mark Rubio, the little tug that could. but didn't. Another Republican, Ted Cruz, won his home state of Texas. That's big because there are lots of delegates there, and the neighbouring state of Oklahoma. He remains the only Republican to have beaten Trump. We'll discuss the Democrats a bit later with one of their own strategists, but we begin with our Florida correspondent Steve Mort in Palm Beach, where Donald Trump addressed his faithful supporters not terribly long ago. Steve, it's a long delay, so I'm just going to ask you a big open-ended question, and that is, how good is Trump feeling, and how much of that is bravado or fact?
Well, you know, he's feeling really, really good right now, and most of that is bravado and facts. You've got the usual Trump bravado, and he gave a pretty typical Trump-style speech this evening just at the resort right behind me here in Florida, where he really made fun, if you like, of Marco Rubio, his rival for the GOP nomination, basically saying that Marco Rubio was indeed, as you paraphrased there, the biggest loser of the night. Marco Rubio didn't manage to win a single state. Donald Trump pretty much sweeping the board, with the exception of a couple of states which he lost out to Ted Cruz on, and they were Ted Cruz's home state of Texas and, of course, also Oklahoma. They're two important GOP states, and they also carry quite a lot of delegates. Now, up until now, all the states that have been contested on both sides have had their delegates allocated proportionally. But now we're coming up to those big winner-take-all states, and the reason that you saw Donald Trump right here, along with Marco Rubio and Hillary Clinton here in Florida, was because on March the 15th, you'll see Florida voters go to the polls. It's the first big winner-take-all state. 99 delegates are up for grabs. And Marco Rubio is hoping that here in his home state, if he grabs those voters, then that will basically give a huge boost to his campaign. But the polls are not favouring Marco Rubio in that respect. In fact, some polls show him trailing by double digits to Donald Trump. So bravado and facts really seem to be behind Donald Trump at the moment when it comes to his presidential bid. It's going to take something of a miracle for Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, despite winning Texas, to come from behind at the moment to take enough delegates to win.
Steve, Ted Cruz had to win Texas because it's his home state, and as everyone's pointing out, if you can't win your home state, then you're not going to win anyone else's. He picked it up. He picked up Oklahoma as a bonus. Will that give him momentum? Will that make him a credible challenger elsewhere?
Well, it does give him momentum, but it's a case of, does it give him enough momentum? Indeed, he did have to win Texas, and he won Texas by a pretty good margin. But, you know, Ted Cruz has really pinned his colours to that evangelical religious vote. And therefore, Super Tuesday was very important because it included a huge swath of southern states. And in those southern states, there are a lot of evangelical voters. And the fact that he didn't win in places like Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia, all of those carrying a lot of delegates, the fact that he didn't win there means that it's going to be very difficult to say that he gained the kind of momentum that Donald Trump did. Donald Trump sweeping the board across those states, places that should be a heartland for Ted Cruz. He didn't manage to score victories there. So even though he won Texas and all its delegates, it's going to be very difficult for him to continue that momentum as we move into the big winner-take-all states.
Steve Mort live from Palm Beach, where Donald Trump spoke to his very happy faithful about an hour or two ago. Thanks, Steve. We're going to talk later with the Democrats. A bit later in the program, we have a Democrat strategist who says good day for Clinton, but Sanders, he keeps on keeping on, even though Clinton picked up way more delegates today. Sanders is still in the race. She is coming up. It is 20 minutes past 5. Coming up next, the jury in the Russell Tully murder trial. Here's from a pathologist who says an autopsy found more than 150 shotgun pellets in receptionist Peggy Noble's chest, and hundreds gathers at Oraki Marae to farewell Dr. Ranginui Walker. Mihinarangi Forbes is there. We will cross to her. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Text 2101. Email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and our Facebook and Twitter address is @checkpoint_. RNZ. The High Court murder trial of Russell Tully has heard from a pathologist who described exactly how two women shot in the Ashburton Winds office died. The 49-year-old is on trial for the murders of Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland and the attempted murders of their two colleagues at the office in Ashburton in 2014. The accused was not in the High Court in Christchurch for the 6th day of his trial. Sally Murphy reports on the day.
Chief Forensic Pathologist Martin Sage read parts of his medical report into the deaths of Miss Noble and Miss Cleveland to the jury. He said when he conducted an autopsy on receptionist Peggy Noble, 158 shotgun pellets were found in her chest. Mr Sage says Miss Noble died immediately.
The blast passed into the upper central chest, demolishing the upper third of the breastbone and fracturing the connections of the second and third ribs on both sides. Many pellets had passed through the major blood vessels at the base of the heart, demolishing about 80 millimetres length of the first part of the greatest artery in the body, called the aorta, as it leaves the heart.
Dr Sage also read out details about the death of Lee Cleveland, who was shot 3 times. He told the court the third shot was fatal.
The fatal discharge was that of a shotgun slug, which had passed through the front of her right shoulder with her right arm elevated up adjacent to her head, then down across the upper right-hand part of her chest, passing through the central upper portion of her breastbone, demolishing it, down through the great blood vessels of the base of the heart, through the heart itself, and then the underlying diaphragm, where it tangentially damaged the liver and spleen in the left abdominal cavity.
The court also heard details of how the accused, Mr Tully, was arrested. Police dog handler Reuben Wally told the court he was driving to the Lake Hood area to look for the offender when he noticed a red mountain bike sticking out of the hedge. He says his dog Luca showed a lot of interest in the area.
I then yelled out a challenge as a police dog handler.
Yes. So what did you say?
Police dog handler, I have a dog. Come out now or the dog will be deployed and he will bite you.
Mr Wally says he could not see the offender but heard him scream when the dog bit him.
We couldn't see the offender. We couldn't see if the offender had anything in his hands. I then reached down, grabbed the offender's boot and dragged him out of the hedge.
When you were able to get a better look at the person, what could you see?
I could see that the offender was struggling with the police dog. He had his hands around the dog's face area. He was trying to wrench the dog's jaws apart and also poking at the dog's eye area.
Police and medical staff who first responded to the shooting are expected to give evidence when the trial continues tomorrow. In the High Court in Christchurch, Sally Murphy.
Just coming up to 23 minutes past 5. Increasing numbers of refugees remain trapped at the Greece-Macedonia border, somehow enduring cold and wet weather, miserable conditions. The UN is warning Europe is on the cusp of a humanitarian crisis. Natasha Howard from Reuters reports.
Thousands of migrants remain stranded on the border between Greece and Macedonia. Fears are mounting that numbers will swell to uncontrollable levels. Frustration is boiling over. Macedonian police fired tear gas on Monday to disperse migrants as they stormed a border, tearing down a metal gate in the process.
I think the people are angry, so we can't control them.
Restrictions have been imposed on people moving through the Balkans, and a deeply divided Europe is struggling to respond. The conditions in this camp are dire. It is cold and the rain is heavy.
The situation was very bad, sir. We are here from 4 days. We had a swimming time last night. Our tent is so wet, like our clothes. It was a very difficult night.
Officials say the number of migrants and refugees trapped in Greece could triple in the coming days.
That report from Natasha Howard. We're going to look now at Apple, the FBI and others testifying before a congressional panel about that controversy that we've been looking at over the past couple of weeks surrounding Apple's refusal to unlock an iPhone belonging to one of the San Bernardino shooters. Of course, the FBI wants them to, is adamant they should. Apple saying no way. Bobby Rebel from Reuters explains.
The controversy over whether Apple should unlock a phone belonging to one of the San Bernardino shooters at the FBI's request went to Capitol Hill on Tuesday. FBI Director James Comey telling a congressional panel,
Apple is very good at what it does. It's a wonderful company, makes wonderful products. Right? They have set out to design a phone that can't be opened. And they're darn near succeeding.
Comey admitted that the court order to open the phone would be, quote, potentially precedential in other cases. Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance appeared in court in support of the FBI.
Criminals know that the iOS 8 operating system is warrant-proof. Criminals understand that this new operating system provides them with a cloak of secrecy. And they are, ladies and gentlemen, quite literally laughing at us. And they are astounded that they have a means of communication totally secure from government reach.
But Apple's general counsel, Bruce Sewell, argued that creating a tool to unlock the phone would weaken the security of hundreds of millions of Apple devices and rejected accusations that Apple is merely protecting its brand.
And every time I hear this, my blood boils. This is not a marketing issue. That's a way of demeaning the other side of the argument. We don't put up billboards that talk about our security. We don't take out ads that market our encryption. We're doing this because we think that protecting the security and the privacy of hundreds of millions of iPhone users is the right thing to do.
Yaja Butler of the Center for Democracy and Technology says much of this could have been avoided.
Apple has been cooperating with the FBI repeatedly. The only reason they've had to go this route is because the FBI and the county messed up. Without going through Apple, they remotely changed the iCloud password of this device. If they hadn't done that, they would have been able to take this iPhone to a location where it could have been connected to Wi-Fi. They could have backed up the iPhone, and Apple could have then accessed that data.
Apple has said it is willing to take this case to the Supreme Court.
A report from Reuters in the US. Back home, the Labour Party says the burgeoning level of student debt is a ticking time bomb. The Union of Students Association says the total loan debt was expected to reach the $15 billion mark by the start of this month. Official figures show more than 720,000 people now have student loans. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
The union's president, Lindsay Higgins, says the level of loan debt is having a big impact on society because it limits the choices students can make later in life.
For students, it's the implications around really big topics such as home ownership, retirement savings, the decision to have a family or study at a higher level. These options are being removed from students because of their debt.
During parliamentary question time, Labour's leader Andrew Little put that to the Prime Minister John Key.
Does he even accept that forcing young people into $15 billion worth of student debt creates a barrier to study and puts off other life opportunities like owning your own home?
John Key took issue with Mr Little's premise that students were forced to take loans.
People do take student loans, and they take them because they know that on average, if they have an undergraduate degree, they'll earn 46% more on average after 5 years. That's a very sensible investment.
Andrew Little then put this bromantic proposition to Mr Key.
Will he come with me this afternoon, hand in hand if necessary, to Massey University and explain why he wants to give tax cuts for the wealthy instead of reducing the $15 billion student loan burden?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Well, if the member will come on TV tonight and say he's going to vote for the new New Zealand flag, I'll come hand in hand with them to Massey University for sure.
Supplementary.
Mr Little used his next question to promote Labour's policy of 3 years free tertiary education.
Will he just level with me for a moment? When can we expect him to adopt this as National Party's policy, given his adoption of other policies he hated, like KiwiSaver, interest-free student loans, working for families?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Well, it's certainly true, Mr Speaker, that under a National-led government we have improved, continued with policies like interest-free student loans. I accept that. But actually, here's the rub, isn't it? Mr Joyce has dramatically improved that because under Labor, student debt grew at 11.6%. Under National, it grows at 4.2%.
The government says students who remain in New Zealand pay off their student loans on average in less than 6 years. It says the median student loan balance is currently just over $14,000. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Chris Bramwell.
Coming up, we cross live to the Oraki Marae, where our Māori issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes has been attending Dr. Ranginui Walker's tangi. Been described as a really lovely day up there. And Otago University steps up security measures in the wake of last week's reported disorder and couch lighting. We also have business news with Nona, and we talk to a Democrat strategist about the Clinton versus Sanders race in the primary. All of that coming up. But first, here's Leilani Mamoisia with the news headlines.
The police have identified the bound woman who was seriously injured when she escaped from a moving car in Papatoetoe last night. They say she is a 50-year-old Thai woman who lives in Auckland. She remains in Middlemore Hospital in a critical condition. One of the residents who rushed to help her, Jay Shah, told Checkpoint the car was a grey or silver sedan, not flash or brand new. Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton have notched up a series of wins in the Super Tuesday presidential primaries in the United States. Mr. Trump won in 6 states but lost to Texas Senator Ted Cruz in Texas and Oklahoma. US networks predict wins for Hillary Clinton in 6 states, plus the territory of American Samoa. The Ashburton work and income murder trial has heard Russell Tully tried to wrench open a police dog's mouth and gouge its eyes when he was being arrested. The 49-year-old is charged over the deaths of Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland and the attempted murder of 2 of their colleagues in 2014. The pathologist who conducted the post-mortem on Peggy Noble told jurors he found 158 shotgun pellets in her chest. More than 1,000 mourners have been farewelling the kaumatua and academic Ranginui Walker at Oraki Marae in Auckland. Members of his Bay of Plenty iwi, Te Whakatohea, escorted Dr. Walker's body onto the marae. No one will be charged after a police officer shot and killed a man in an Auckland park last year. David Servin, who was 21, was shot in Myers Park in the central city. A decision by the police not to prosecute TV3 staff over an illegal gun purchase is disappointing to the shop owner involved in the process. And it's 5:32.
Thanks, Leilani. Leilani will be back at 6 with the full news. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier, who's sitting beside me here in the Auckland studio. New Zealand's housing market back in the news. What are the latest QV house prices? Tell us, Nona.
Well, the numbers are flat for the country. That's this past month, February. From those numbers are from that's February from January, so they were flat. Now that's in keeping with the 3-month change, so they were pretty flat as well, and a fall in Auckland. So that's where we're seeing the flat numbers, because some places have seen quite large rises over that month, and in areas closest to Auckland, but also the major centres have also seen rises. So it's been quite interesting, and that means that the Reserve Bank is probably less likely to feel worried about lowering interest rates, because of course the pressure has come off the market. Of course, the prices are still quite high, though. I mean, you wouldn't exactly say that the prices in Auckland are low or falling substantially. And so it could be, over time, we're still going to see price pressures there with the housing market and supply issue still an issue.
Because if the Reserve Bank lowers the OCR, then it's cheaper to borrow money. Right. People go and borrow money and spend more on their properties. But in fact, if the market is sluggish, the conventional wisdom is that people are cautious about charging headlong at it, which means that the sort of OCR falls that we've seen predicted by the major banks this week are more likely, do you think?
Okay, now it depends on which central banks. So on the in the U.S. market, we are seeing a strengthening economy there. So it's looking like the U.S. Federal Reserve will hike rates. And here in New Zealand, we're still seeing very positive economic indicators. The low inflation, though, is a very big concern. So that's putting pressure on the central bank here to lower interest rates. And also in Australia. Speaking of Australia, they've released their economic data.
GDP figures?
That's right. And they were better, much stronger than expected.
Wow. Because if we looked at some of the results in Australia, particularly in the the mining sector, they were just tanking, and that tended to infer that the Australian economy would be doing something similar.
Yeah, well, but their economy grew at 3% annual growth, which was a lot more. The the analysts had been expecting about 2.5%. They got a 3% annual growth there, and on the quarter, it was also better than, of course, than the market was expecting. So, anyways, that caused the Australian dollar to look a little bit sharper because that's taken pressure off the Reserve Bank of Australia to worry about interest rates right now. And so, what did we get? The New Zealand market, our local share market, rose 0.5% today. That was great. That was in line with all of Asia and, of course, Australia. Australia's up 2.5%. They're happy. So we got up 32 points. Now, that's really interesting because we're only now 20 points off our all-time record, which we hit at the end of last year.
Wow.
Yeah. So very strong numbers there. So we finished at 63.13, which is, just off 63.33, which was where we ended off last year. And our dollar, 66.3 US cents, 91.7 Australian.
Gosh, it's confusing times, isn't it? There's so many mixed signals. Who'd be a Reserve Bank governor? No.
Not me.
No. Thank you, Nana Peltier, our Auckland business reporter. The time is 5:36. More than 1,000 mourners have gathered at Auckland's Oraki Marae today to farewell Dr. Ranginui Walker, who passed away, of course, on Monday. Members of his Bay of Plenty iwi, Te Whakatohea, escorted Dr. Walker's body onto the marae. Our Māori Issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes is there and joins us now live from the marae. Mihi, you've been there all day. What's it been like up there?
Well, kia ora, John. Koutou katoa. We're here at Tumutumu Whenua Marae at Orake on Bastion Point, Takaparafo. It's been a lovely day, actually. It's been, as you said, 1,000 people came on in the first ope that took the family, the whānau Pani, into the marae and settled him in. And they just, behind me is the marae ātea, they just kept coming and coming through the gateway. I think even Orake was surprised how many people followed through Whakatohea. They came from all walks of life. We had professors and doctors, we had school kids, along with Whakatohea, the actual core iwi and hapu where Dr. Ranginui Walker grew up in Waiowa. And inside the whare, it was just packed to the brim, and all outside, everyone seated just because everyone wanted to listen to the whai kōrero. The pai, which is the front line where all the speakers line up to speak, well, there wasn't enough seats for everybody. Everybody tried to get in there because, this is the place where you say goodbye. But it was gorgeous in there. There were so many speeches during the day. The first welcome took about 3 to 4 hours to get through them all. There were speeches from people like Honi Harawira, who remembered Dr. Ranginui Walker and Pat Hohepa as a couple of younger guys, and they used to call them Patman and Rangi and do the Batman sound. And he talked about how that once they got caught taking too much kaimoana from up north, and so there was laughs. Winston Peters stood up because he has a relationship with Ranginui Walker through his father, and they told jokes about how Mātātua waka, which is the Whakatohea waka that arrived from Hawaii, had to stop off at Whananaki where Winston was from because it had a hole in it. So that joke continued over and over through the pai, but it was gorgeous, and there were just so many greetings and mihi to Deirdre, Dr. Ranginui Walker's wife, for just her staunch support for her husband through all of his ventures and everything he did, and everyone really acknowledged her, their 3 children. There was a joke that he had set the bar so high that his 3 children were all doctors, and then all of the grandchildren had become doctors as well.
Wow, what a man, what a life. Thanks, Mihi Narangi. Mihi has been talking to people up there, and we're going to have that report a bit later in Checkpoint, but that was Mihi Narangi live from the marae at Oraki beside Bastion Point. Of course, that is such an important part of our history, that piece of land which was effectively stolen from the people it belonged to. And Ranginui Walker's great skill was explaining those things to us from a Māori point of view to make us all understand. Mihi will have more on his extraordinary life and what people were saying about him later in the program. At the beginning of the program, we looked at Super Tuesday from a Republican perspective. Well, now Hillary Clinton is approaching a clean sweep of the South. So we're looking at the Democrats, Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and a bit of a surprise this evening, Massachusetts, which isn't South, of course. While Sanders has won his home state, Vermont, everyone expecting that, as well as Colorado, Oklahoma and Minnesota. Now, Marge Halperin is a Democrat strategist, a commentator and journalist. I asked her what Hillary Clinton's good day, including a big win in Texas, which is important because there's a lot of delegates there, and Bernie Sanders' pretty good day, including wins in Vermont and Oklahoma and others, although neither of those states have big delegate weighting, told the Democrats about the state of their primary contest.
I think that they're telling the Democrats they got a ways to go before this thing is wrapped up. This is in some ways a little deja vu for Hillary, I think, back to 2008 when she thought she had things wrapped up and Barack Obama came really out of nowhere. And Bernie Sanders is kind of pulling the same trick, giving her a run for her money, that's for sure.
He is giving her a run for her money, but equally he is winning in smaller centres, isn't he? There seems to be a real rural-urban divide here. Is that your sense of it?
Yes, and certainly she's taken Texas, which is the biggest prize of the night and has the most delegates. And in other states, Massachusetts and others, we're seeing her votes concentrate in urban areas, and Sanders is picking up votes in more rural areas. But one thing that's important to know, John, is that these are not winner-take-all contests for the Democrats. The GOP has some, but the Democrats split their delegates based on the vote. So if Sanders can hold Clinton to 60%, say, he picks up some sizable numbers of delegates in these states, and even if he doesn't amass enough to win the nomination, he has enough to bargain on floor fights, on platform issues, single-payer health care, things he believes in when they get to the convention. So he's not going anywhere anytime soon. He wants more delegates.
Yeah, can we look at who is winning whom? Hillary Clinton appears to be picking up more African Americans and also, slightly at odds with that, the more establishment white voter. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's true. And the big test for Sanders, now he comes from Vermont, which is largely a white state, a white, well-educated, certain kind of constituent. Hillary Clinton has campaigned and won support from her past elections and has a network through her husband's campaign across all demographics. African-American voters have been very strong with Bill Clinton, and she's sharing the love there. He's campaigning for her, too. And that's been the big test. Can Sanders expand his base beyond what my daughter calls the young white dudes?
The young white dudes who are supporting Sanders, is that going to be enough for him to really pose a serious threat to Hillary Clinton? Or is he increasingly looking like an idealistic, almost fairy tale candidate who will inevitably succumb to Hillary Clinton?
Oh, can I have an answer somewhere in between those two? Is that enough, the young white? No, he needs more than that. But he has been building slowly, getting some older demographic, but still not the mixed race demographic, not the African-American voter, Latino voters he really needs to win. And yet he's not a fantasy candidate either. He's gone too far down the road to be that dismissive, I would say. And I still don't think he's going to pull out the nomination. But as I said before, he's giving Hillary a run, and he proved himself to be very real indeed. As I said, he's going to have enough delegates to likely take to the convention and wield some power. And he's already pushed Hillary further to the left. You know, her roots are as a pretty strong progressive, but through the years of her husband's presidency, she has moderated and moved to the center with him. So I think the good thing for our party is that Sanders has pushed her back to the left, where I like to see her, and I think a lot of voters like that too.
Marge Halperin. a Democratic strategist. Bill Clinton isn't pregnant, obviously. We know they're campaigning hard and we know they'd do anything to win the vote, but he hasn't managed that. It's coming up to 5:45. We're going to go to Dunedin now, where Otago University is stepping up security measures in the wake of last week's disorder and couch lighting. Reporter Ian Telfer has the latest.
John, I'm in Hyde Street, which is one of Dunedin's most notorious streets, a party street for the University of Otago, and a street where we've just found out today the university has put up a security camera. This is pretty much the view that the security camera has. It's behind you. It looks right down this street. Now, the residents here say they didn't know, but this might be the first of many, because the university also revealed today plans for 50 to 60 cameras like this all around the North Dunedin area. The university campus has 400 of these cameras on the campus, but now they want to bring it into the residential streets to deal with disorder and couch burning and some of the things we've been hearing about from orientation last week. The university says it doesn't know what students think about this, and in fact it's not going to ask them. So we thought we probably should. There's always a hint of party on Hyde Street, but now it's under the watchful gaze of a camera mounted quietly on a far wall. Ria Brisbane says she found out a few weeks ago when a neighbour got suspended for couch lighting after being spotted by the camera.
I don't like it. I feel watched every time I come out to do anything. You can't step out of your property without being videoed, and it's, I don't know, I get that it's for the safety and stuff, but at the same time we need a bit of privacy. You can't come out and have a coffee and a ciggy without being oh, there's someone watching me right now, yeah, it's a bit creepy.
Another resident, Bailey Miller, says the university's overreacting.
I think it's a breach of privacy. If I can't walk down the street and not be worried about being watched all the time, I think that's a breach of my own privacy, and all my mates are the same, we don't like it. This isn't an area they should need to be, I suppose there is couch fires, but the campus watch are down here every day.
Uni's talking about putting 50 or 60 now, the whole area.
Yeah, I think that's even worse, we're going to be watched 24/7, some of these cameras you can see everything on our front yards, everything we're drinking,
Other students told me they're okay with it.
I think it's fine if there's heaps of cameras around the campus, because there is lots of stuff that happens and for safety reasons and stuff, but I feel like our street is just the one being targeted at the moment. Castle Street had a house go on fire the other day and there's no cameras watching them, so I feel like if it was all around the uni then that would be fine.
But they still wish they'd been told when the camera went in.
Can they see in anyone's room? Can they see in our lounges where we're doing our own private things? I don't know. It's just pointing down the street, but who knows? Could be one of those movable cameras.
Michael Thompson says the cameras will just end up hurting the university and discouraging people from going to places like Hyde Street.
Can get pretty rowdy down here, but it's part of the reason everyone comes to this university. All the stuff in the papers now is about how the university numbers are dropping, and I think it's because of stuff like this. They're taking away the scarfy lifestyle, and it's just killing the university. And yeah, we do get a bit stupid on the street, but it's what you do when you're our age. I'm sure you probably did it when you were our age, and the people before us did it when they were our age as well, and we're facing all the consequences.
Otago University's Deputy Proctor, Andy Ferguson, says it has no plans to consult students before installing 50 to 60 cameras around the streets of North Dunedin. He says the university has a duty to keep them safe.
I believe that most students would be behind this proposal. I think that anything that increases their safety can only be a good thing. I think if the majority of students would like to go to bed at night feeling safe and not worried about some idiot bringing a couch and putting it against the side of their house and lighting it. So we haven't canvassed them, but I believe that they'll be the majority of them will be behind us.
Hyde Street might not be the average student quarter, but here at least the university has some convincing to do. On Hyde Street for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
12 minutes, just after 11 minutes to 6. We're going to go to Pitcairn Island in about 3 minutes. But first, it's described as the gift of life. But new figures show the majority of families refuse to allow a loved one's organs to be donated after the issue had been formally discussed. Give Life New Zealand, an organ donation lobby group, obtained the figures from the Auckland District Health Board and is calling for more awareness of the issue and an online register. Laura Bootham reports.
GiveLife says the country's low donation rates need to change urgently. Spokesperson Andy Tukey says families of potential organ donors are denying sick people the opportunity of receiving a life-saving transplant.
Out of the 135 potential donors last year that were formally discussed with the families, only 53 out of that 135 agreed to donation.
Andy Tukey says the figures released under the Official Information Act also show donation was only discussed with family in 37% of the 367 deaths suitable for donation. He wants to see the creation of an online register.
There is no public awareness about it. And there would certainly be less people saying no to a loved one's organs being donated if they knew what their wishes were. If we had an online register, it would be easily accessible by the organ donor doctors or intensive care doctors, and they would be able to tell the family what those persons' wishes were.
Rob Harley had a liver transplant at the beginning of January.
We have a few good stories out there of how people's lives have been dramatically turned around. In my own case, I got a liver in the nick of time. I'm very, very grateful to whoever it was who lost their life, and the outcomes is that I've now got life.
He believes that creating more awareness is crucial.
It's a huge deal for a family, a wife, mum or dad, or a son or daughter or brother or sister. It's a huge amount for them to be coping with. About the only way I can see that it's going to get better is for us to make sure that there is adequate education and that families do talk about it.
A public policy think tank, the New Zealand Initiative, has done research on the economics of organ transplants. Its head of research, Eric Crampton, backs the creation of an online register as well as more education. And he says there's also an economic spin-off to improving New Zealand's organ donation rates, which are some of the worst in the Western world.
Every time that somebody donates a kidney, the government saves about $125,000 in longer-term dialysis costs, and that's net of the cost of doing the transplant. So it's really a good thing for the Ministry of Health, for the person who's receiving the kidney, and for the country when we're able to get more donors.
The Ministry of Health, Jonathan Coleman, says he received preliminary advice from officials on an organ donor register last year, but has been advised that a register on its own would be unlikely to lift donation rates. For Checkpoint, Laura Bootham.
Let's go to Pitcairn Island. The Crown has told 2 Pitcairn Islanders that they have the chance to tell the world what is considered acceptable behaviour on the island 11 years after the child sex abuse trials made headlines around the world. The former mayor of the island, Michael Warren, is currently on trial having denied charges of possessing indecent material. The trial before Judge Arthur Tompkins and 2 members of the tiny island community is nearing its final stages. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay has been following the case and he's with us in the studio. Edward, this trial is taking place on Pitcairn, right?
That's right.
There's a New Zealand judge up there, 2 members of the local community sitting with him. How do you follow the case when you are clearly in Auckland?
Well, I follow the case because the case is through a video link broadcast back to the consulate's office on Queen Street, to the boardroom, basically, a table not too dissimilar to the size of this one, where there is myself, the consulate, the Pitcairn consulate, also the Warren's other lawyer, Tony Ellis, is there as well. So there's microphones, there's video, it's all linked up.
And what's the quality like coming in from Pitcairn? Can you see and hear it the whole time?
We've dropped out now and again. It's a long way away. It's between New Zealand and Chile, somewhere between New Zealand and Chile. Look, it is a bit patchy, but it's amazing. It is live. It's about as good a quality as this.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Let's look at the case itself, which is grimmer. Actually, once again, Michael Warren. The Crown is encouraging the islanders, the 2 islanders who are sitting with Judge Arthur Tompkins effectively, to send a message to the world. What are they saying?
Well, the Crown prosecutor, Kieran Raftery, who's from New Zealand, he's flown out there. He referenced today the historic child sex trials back in 2004 when these 7 men went on trial for the child sex charges. He said that he was aware that the island is trying to rehabilitate itself, and he said that basically he told these 2 assessors, a sort of 2-man jury, if you like, that they weren't just being asked to determine what was indecent for the judge and for the court, but essentially this message was going to the rest of the world He said that this online sex chat with a person purporting to be a 15-year-old girl, there was 30 years difference between Warren and this 15-year-old at the time. And there was also this explicit video which shows a bound and gagged naked woman, and Mr. Raftery said that woman would have suffered a serious injury.
Okay. Boy, so Michael Warren's already been found guilty of having offensive material involving children, right, earlier in the week. In fact, you were in here on Monday or Tuesday discussing exactly that. Warren's lawyer once again says there's nothing indecent about the chat or the video. So that's the line the defence is running.
That's right. Yeah. Graham Edgeler said for Warren in his closing address today that video, that adult video, he said it contained professional actors, that they had agreed to take part in this, they agreed to put it on the internet. He also said, in reference to the chat, that it was so bizarre, some of the things that were being talked about in this chat over months as well, was so bizarre that it just can't be real. There's no evidence that this was actually a 15-year-old girl. Tomorrow we're going to hear the judge summing up, and that at that point we'll have the assessors, the two islanders, they'll retire and discuss what their findings are. The judge isn't bound by that decision, right. But then he'll come back and deliver a judgment.
Edward Gay, our Auckland court reporter. Thanks so much, Edward. The time is just over 4 minutes to 6. Newly released documents seized in the 2011 raid on Osama bin Laden's Pakistani hideout revealed that Al-Qaeda's leaders were increasingly worried about spies, drones and secret tracking devices. Mana Rabi from Reuters explains.
U.S. intelligence agencies have released more than 100 new documents taken from Osama bin Laden's compound after the raid that killed him in 2011, including this one, thought to be his last will, as well as letters to his father and notes from associates. Together, they paint a picture of an al-Qaeda under the strain of managing its external network as the U.S.-led war against the group was grinding on. They also reveal suspicion among its leaders, concerned that there were spies in their midst, drones watching from the air, and broad U.S. surveillance on their movements. The documents show bin Laden had spelled out how he wanted at least $29 million of his wealth, kept in Sudan, to be divided after his death. Most of it was to be used to continue his global jihad. One senior intelligence official, speaking on condition of anonymity, said the latest documents show bin Laden was still thinking of grand schemes like the 9/11 attacks, but that he was also, quote, somewhat out of touch and may have been unaware of his group's reduced capabilities.
That report from Reuters. The first passengers on the longest direct flight in the world landed in Auckland this morning. Emirates today launched its new route between Dubai and Auckland. Previously, if you wanted to fly from Auckland to Dubai, you had to go through Australia to do so. Now, the 14,000-kilometre flight takes 16 hours to get to New Zealand. The journey back to Dubai takes even longer, 17 hours and 15 minutes. One leg. Reporter Alex Ashton spoke to some travellers as they touched down in Auckland.
Really nice just to have it in one stretch.
So worth a bit of extra time for that?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. To not have to get off the plane at all is amazing. This is it. I'm home.
Long. It was okay, but where the stewardesses are, there's a lot of noise generated from there and they talk all night. So, yeah, it was a long flight for a lot of noise, but I wouldn't do it again.
So you're coming off not a lot of sleep then?
I've come from the UK. Yeah, not a lot of sleep. 4 hours since the UK.
Just watched loads of films, slept. It's the first long haul flight I've done as well. So I've been on planes for, including time zones, 3 days. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
At least it's not 19 hours or 20 hours or 25 hours.
What did you do?
I read my book. I watched a couple of movies. The girl in front of me sprayed a load of perfume and it got all in my mouth, and that was all I could taste for half the flight. It was terrible.
Long. Long, but not as long as it could have been if we'd have had to touch down in Australia. So we saved 3 hours, basically. So
at least from that point of view, it's better not having to stop over there. You can't leave the plane either. So this one, but sitting for that length of time, boy, it's no fun. I've done 14 hours before, Paris, Buenos Aires, and that is just about manageable. But this, after 14 hours, you think, bloody hell, still another 2-3 hours to go is a long way.
It was a very, very long leg from, stopping in Brisbane for sort of 2.5 hours and then starting again, so it made it a really, really long journey, so it was much more pleasant, definitely, yeah. I've done this journey probably 3 dozen times, haven't I, so you get used to it.
The flight back to Dubai leaves tonight at 9:30. That will take 17 hours and 15 minutes. That was our reporter Alex Ashton, by the way. But the Auckland-Dubai route won't hold the longest flight title for long. At the end of March, at the end of this month, Emirates starts flying direct from Dubai to Panama, which will take 17.5 hours. That's a long, long leg. It's just coming up to 6 o'clock. Text us with your feedback, 2101. Email us, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Facebook and Twitter, Checkpoint RNZ. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thank you for joining us. Half an hour left in the program tonight. We're going to find out more about the woman who's fighting for her life after she seems to have flung herself bound and gagged from a car boot. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton notch up Super Tuesday wins. We're going to look in a little more depth at this, and mourners share their memories of Dr. Ranginui Walker. All of that coming up in the next 30 minutes. But first, here's the news with Leilani Mamoisia.
Kia ora, good evening. The police have identified the woman who was critically injured when she escaped from a moving car in Papatoetoe last night, but they're still searching for the car, a late model silver sedan. They say she's a 50-year-old Thai woman who lives in Auckland. Residents saw her escape out of the car's boot, bleeding and with ties around her legs, arms and neck on Huia Road in Papatoetoe, and some, like Jay Shah, rushed to her aid.
Her legs and her hands were tied up, so they were not tightly tied up, they were loose, but there were ropes around her and she was bleeding from her nose.
Jay Shah says the woman had a metal rod beside her, which is probably how she freed herself from the car boot. She remains in Middlemore Hospital. Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton have swept through the South on Super Tuesday, claiming victory in their party's primaries in delegate-rich Tennessee, Alabama and Virginia. On the Republican side, Ted Cruz won his home state of Texas, the night's single biggest prize, as well as neighbouring Oklahoma, and Marco Rubio is set to take Minnesota. Democrat Bernie Sanders picked up a home state win as well in Vermont and won in Oklahoma, Minnesota and Colorado too. The BBC's Gary O'Donoghue reports.
There are not too many surprises in the results so far, though Senator Ted Cruz will take a good deal of heart from projections which point to him winning Oklahoma, as well as his home state of Texas. Donald Trump looks set to consolidate his domination of the Republican race, however, and Marco Rubio will be concerned that he doesn't appear to have made the progress he would have wanted. For the Democrats, Hillary Clinton is heading for a convincing win, though her rival Bernie Sanders has vowed to fight on through all 50 states.
Gary O'Donoghue reporting. The kaumatua and academic Ranginui Walker is now lying in state at Orake Marae. More than 1,000 mourners paid their respects there, including the Māori king, Kingi Tuheitia. A funeral service will be held on Friday, and after that, Dr. Walker's family will hold a private cremation. Our Māori Issues correspondent, Mihinarangi Forbes, was at Orake Marae.
Behind me is the Marae Atia. They just kept coming and coming through the gateway. I think even Orake was surprised how many people followed through Whakatohia. They came from all walks of life. We had professors and doctors, we had school kids, along with Whakatohia, the actual core iwi and hapu where Dr. Ranginui Walker grew up in Waiowa.
Mihinarangi Forbes. 4 New Zealand medical and surgical teams are heading to Fiji to help out following Cyclone Winston. They include nurses, surgeons, anaesthetists, emergency medicine specialists and a health planner. The teams will be based in Suva in the northern Lau Island group and on Koro Island. The Ministry's Acting Director of Public Health, Dr Stuart Jessamine, says the risk of diarrhoea and mosquito-borne infections is likely to increase following Cyclone Winston.
Our job when we go up there is to get out into the countryside, visit villages and provide primary care, treat wounds, treat infections, and that the risk of infectious disease is managed and reduced as best we can.
Dr Stuart Jessamine. It is the largest deployment yet of the Ministry of Health's Medical Assistance Team, which was established following the tsunami in Samoa in 2009. The Labour Party says the burgeoning level of student loan debt is a ticking time bomb. The Union of Students' Associations says the loan debt was expected to reach the $15 billion mark by the start of this month. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
During question time, Labour's leader Andrew Little asked the Prime Minister if he accepted that forcing young people into $15 billion of student debt created a barrier to study and put off other life opportunities like owning a home. John Key replied that people take up the loans because they know if they have an undergraduate degree they'll earn 46% more on average after 5 years, so it was a sensible investment. The government says students who remain in New Zealand pay off their student loans on average in less than 6 years. The median student loan balance is currently just over $14,000. From Parliament, Chris Bramwell.
And in sports news, the New Zealand Breakers basketball team are hoping to send their departing coach, Dean Vickerman, out on a winning note. Tonight marks the start of the Australian National Basketball League Championship final series between the Breakers and Perth Wildcats, with the first of the 3 matches in Perth. Vickerman's been with the club since 2007 and helped them to 1 championship title as head coach, and the Breakers captain, Mika Vukona, says the team plan on giving him 2 championship rings.
Everybody doesn't see him as an Aussie New Zealander. He's a Kiwi for us, and anytime somebody goes out and pours their heart and soul into an organisation like that, you'd like to do the right thing.
The Breakers are chasing their 5th title in the last 6 seasons. Tip-off is at 11:30 tonight. Leicester City have stumbled in their pursuit of the English Premier League football title with a 2-2 draw with West Bromwich Albion. The result lifts Leicester to 57 points from 28 matches, 3 ahead of Tottenham Hotspur, who, thanks to a better goal difference, will go top if they win at West Ham United tomorrow. Chelsea have moved to 8th with a 2-1 win over relegation-threatened Norwich City. And Argentina's beaten the New Zealand women's hockey team 2-1 in Mar del Plata in the 5th test of their 6-match series. The series is now level at 2 games, all with 1 match drawn. The last game in the series is on Friday. And that's the latest in RNZ Sport.
Tonight on Nights, tackling modern-day slavery with Judy Boyle, founder of the No Project, because young people are at the front line of the battle against human trafficking, both as victims and consumers. We're undercover in Mumbai with Inspector Alia Khan, and Eri Garuti reports in from France, where some of the locals are worried about what's happening to their language. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And the Met Service weather till midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, long fine spells with a few light showers. Western areas from Waikato to Wellington, also Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, mainly fine, isolated showers about Taranaki tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay is becoming fine tomorrow. Wairarapa, Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Canterbury and North Otago, fine but cloudy periods. Westland and Fiordland, patchy drizzle developing tomorrow, then turning to rain in Fiordland during the evening. Central Otago, Dunedin, Clutha and Southland, there's scattered rain developing late tomorrow afternoon or evening. And Chatham Islands, there's cloudy periods and a few showers until the morning. And it's 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Leilani. Have a lovely evening. Leilani Mamoisia, our newsreader, back with us tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. Police have identified a severely injured woman who flung herself from the boot of a moving car in South Auckland while bound and gagged. The 50-year-old who lives in Auckland and is of Thai descent tumbled from the vehicle on Huia Road in Papatoetoe last night. Witnesses say she was bleeding, frothing at the mouth, and had rope and cloth tied around her legs, arms and neck. Police have contacted her immediate family. We can confirm that. Our police reporter Carla Penman has more.
Jay Shah lives on Huia Road and says he was putting his rubbish bins out when he saw the woman leap out of the car right near him.
Her legs were and her hands were tied up, so they were not tightly tied up, they were loose, but there were ropes around her, and she was bleeding from her nose, and there was a metal rod next to her. So my immediate reaction was that this is some kind of a kidnapping or something.
He says there were cloth ties knotted around her neck.
I quickly tried to untie the knot of her tie because she was, from what I can see, she was not able to breathe. So I untied it, and by the time I got other people there helping me.
Another witness, Apurva Nayak, says the woman was badly bruised
and bleeding. You know, she was nearly unconscious. But there was a bystander who actually stopped, and he was extremely efficient. He stopped the traffic and he just made sure that she was okay.
Ms. Nayak says it was like a scene from the movies and she hopes she pulls through. Detective Inspector Dave Lynch says 4 witnesses saw the boot of the car fly open and a woman bound and gagged tumble out.
One of those members of the public, and we really want to acknowledge that person, attempted to follow the silver vehicle that the woman came out of, but unfortunately was unable to obtain a registration number.
He says while mystery surrounds the lead up to her escape, there's no indication of any sexual violence.
She was unresponsive towards the public, ambulance and police at the time, so unfortunately we haven't been able to communicate with her directly, and obviously she's in a coma, and certainly we're unlikely to be able to talk to her directly.
Inspector Lynch says she sustained a head injury, but it's too early to say whether it's a result of her hitting the road. He says witness accounts vary, but they think at least 1, possibly 2 people were in the car the woman escaped from.
We do only have a limited description of the vehicle, and just described as a late model silver vehicle with a factory model spoiler on it.
He says they're also reviewing CCTV footage from the area. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Carla Penman.
Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton are notching up a series of wins in so-called Super Tuesday. Why is this day so important? Well, of course, it is the single largest day in terms of delegates awarded in the primaries. The 2 presidential frontrunners have taken a step toward capturing their party's nominations by doing pretty well, although both challenged by the 2 candidates who are coming in second place, Ted Cruz for the Republicans and Bernie Sanders for the Democrats. US networks are projecting Mr. Trump won 6 states. I think it's gone up to 7. Mrs. Clinton 7 states on Super Tuesday when 12 states have voted. Some of these still haven't been clarified, still being counted. Deborah Lutterbeck from Reuters explains a bit more.
Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton rolled up a series of big primary wins on Tuesday. As the 2 presidential frontrunners look to take command of their party nominating battles on the 2016 campaign's biggest night of voting. For Trump, it was a night to celebrate.
Appreciate it. This has been an amazing evening. Already we've won 5 major states, and it looks like we could win 6 or 7 or 8 or 9.
Clinton declared the winner of at least 6 states, called for a change of tone.
That the stakes in this election have never been higher, and the rhetoric we're hearing on the other side has never been lower. Trying to divide America between us and them is wrong, and we're not going to let it work.
Republican Ted Cruz, a U.S. Senator from Texas, won his home state and neighboring Oklahoma, bolstering his argument that he had the best chance to stop the controversial Trump. U.S. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, the favorite of the Republican establishment, is projected to score his first win in Minnesota. On the Democratic side, Senator Bernie Sanders won his home state of Vermont and Oklahoma, 2 of the 5 states he was targeting for victory on Tuesday. The next contests will be on March 5th.
Right, let's look at the scoreboard. As Bruce Forsyth used to say on the Generation Game, Trump wins Georgia, Vermont, Virginia, Alabama, Massachusetts, Tennessee and Arkansas. Cruz wins Texas, lots of delegates there. That's the biggest single state decided today. And Oklahoma, which is the neighbour. Don't forget that Texas is Cruz's home state. He's the senator. Rubio has picked up a state. This is a guy who is considered at some level actually the most palatable Republican candidate for non-Republican voters. He's finally won a state. It was Minnesota. On the Democrat side, Hillary Clinton has won Texas, Georgia, Virginia, Alabama, Massachusetts, Tennessee and Arkansas. Texas, a big win for her, and she romped home. But Sanders has picked up 4, Vermont, Colorado, Minnesota and Oklahoma. So both Sanders and Cruz are staying in the race. Just, maybe more than just, there's still a way to go. It's almost 6:15. MPs have been told an attempt to prevent convicted child sex offenders from changing their names is impractical and would not stop people using false names. Parliament's Social Services Committee is considering the members' bill proposing that law change. In the name of National Party MP Jian Yang, Gemma Brackybush was there.
The bill would impose a permanent ban on child sex offenders convicted of a specific list of crimes, changing their name with the Registrar General. A policy advisor, Pasan Jasinghe, told MPs such a policy would be easy to get around. He says except for official documents, people are free to use whatever names they want.
You don't need to register a name change to use a new name. A new name comes into effect just by the simple fact of using. Registered name changes are only required for very specific statutory requirements, so for example a passport.
Mr Jasinghe says in some circumstances there may be a need for more discretion.
So allow a competent authority to decide whether it will be justified in some circumstances for child sex offenders to use their name. Also that child sex offenders could seek the consent of another competent authority, so like police or corrections, before they change their name.
The Justice Minister, Amy Adams, acknowledges it's a complex issue.
Often it's a case of taking lots of little steps. No one thing will address it. Obviously they have a view, and they're probably right in saying that this would not be a solution, but whether it's a part of improving it, I guess, is the question for the Select Committee.
The government is in the process of setting up a child sex offender register. Only government agencies would have access to that information. As part of the legislative process, the Attorney-General considered the bill and found the register would provide the police and other agencies with access to up-to-date information, effectively rendering Jian Yang's bill redundant. The New Zealand First MP Richard Prosser says, however, the public as well as government agencies should have access to the register.
Because it's the rights of the child that are most important, and protecting them is more important, we believe, than some kind of sort of academic concept about looking after the rights of offenders. I think the rights of the child are more important than that.
However, Labour's Carmel Sepuloni disagrees.
There wasn't overwhelming support for that from the Select Committee or actually the submitters, the organisations that work with people who have had sexual assault against them. So, I don't even think that's the point.
Parliament's Social Services Committee is currently considering the sex offender register legislation and is due to report back to Parliament in a few weeks. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Gemma Brackybush.
Just before we move on, and it's really interesting, the total votes cast in Super Tuesday. Hillary Clinton picked up 2.7 million, so that's the Democrat voter. Donald Trump from the Republican voters picked up 2.2 million, so 500,000 fewer than Hillary Clinton. Ted Cruz for the Republicans got 1.7 million, so not far behind Trump overall. Sanders a wee way back on Hillary Clinton in second place for the Democrats with 1.6 million. The issue for Sanders is urban centres aren't voting for him in the same numbers that they're voting Hillary Clinton. He's picking up his support in smaller population areas. The time is 18 minutes past 6. Coming up on World Watch at 6:30 with John Greaves, the UN accuses EU governments of contributing to the migrant crisis and a tough new round of sanctions likely for North Korea. But home again, a forestry consultant says wilding pines shouldn't be a problem in New Zealand. Instead, they should be a solution to climate change. Wilding pines or conifers take root almost anywhere, as people will know, spread by wind-blown seeds and are infesting areas including High Country Otago, Marlborough and the North Island Central Plateau. Maya Burry reports.
The Crown Research Institute Scion is calling for more funding to bring the pest trees, which are considered weeds, under control. It says wilding pines will cover 1/5 of New Zealand within 20 years if nothing is done. One of its scientists, Thomas Paul, says the trees are spreading at a rate of about 10 high country stations per year, and intervention is urgently needed.
Where wilding conifers often occur are those very dry grassland situations. We are worried that they invade those natural grasslands that have high biodiversity values or tourism values.
A national strategy on controlling the spread has been agreed to by central and local government and other stakeholders. Last year, the government spent nearly $7 million poisoning the trees, but one community group says there's not enough money to do the job properly. Andrew McAllister, a member of the Marlborough Sounds Restoration Trust, says it's working to control the pest trees on limited funds.
Funding is the big issue. The pines don't stop growing, and in a lot of the project we're making good progress, but we know we'll never get on top of it without more funding.
However, a forestry consultant, Owen Springford, says the government's wasting its money. He says where the wilding pines grow, nothing is thriving, and not only do they increase soil fertility, but they help to manage CO2 emissions too.
We need to have 1/5 of the country in trees anyway to address our carbon issues. Also, forestry does produce a lot of benefits in terms of improving soil quality, water quality, and provides a lot of refuge for native plants and fauna.
Owen Springford says if the government wants to reach its climate change goals by removing carbon dioxide from the air, wilding pines might be the solution. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
The rugby league season kicks off tomorrow night. Yes, it's sports time. I spoke to sports reporter Matt Chatterton and asked, well, what lineup awaits us?
Yes, we've got the Eels taking on the Broncos in the first match. The Broncos last year came second to North Queensland Cowboys in the NRL Premiership. The Eels now have Kieran Foran as their captain. Now he's Kiwi international, so I'm sure he'll be good. He has come from the Manly Sea Eagles, so I'm sure he'll bring a new, interesting lineup to Parramatta. And then, of course, we've got the Warriors playing on Saturday. They're taking on West Tigers over in Australia. So
for people listening who've no idea what you're talking about, let's do a very simple 101 guide. The Warriors are the New Zealand team in the NRL.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, every season, the Warriors fans, like Hurricanes fans in the Super Rugby, say, this is our season. They're the most optimistic people.
Yeah, there's quite a few similarities you could almost put between the two, to be honest.
Endearingly so.
No offence to any Hurricanes or Warriors supporters out there, but they've been to the finals twice, NRL Grand Final twice, and unfortunately they've lost both those times. But they have a new look team this year. Now, every year the media tend to beat up the fact that there's a new look team and that they could really go places this year. But this year, I think, is a little bit different. They've got the likes of Isaac Luke, who is a Kiwis international and who's been playing since he was about 18 for the South Sydney Rabbitohs. He's about 28 now and he's come over to finish his career pretty much with the Warriors. We've got a young up-and-comer named Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who quite possibly will be the next best fullback in the competition. He's a big player. He's only 22. He's got a bright future ahead of him. You've got Sean Johnson coming back from injury.
Inspirational player.
Exactly. And then joining him in that sort of halves area, we've got Jeff Robson, who's come from the Sharks. Now, he's a really experienced player who will give Sean a bit of freedom to do what he does best.
So the first objective in the NRL is to make the playoffs, right?
Yep.
And that's the top 8.
That is indeed.
Matt, with head not heart, can the Warriors do that this season?
They can. In fact, Jim Doyle, the managing director at the Warriors, has said that he expects them to be in the top 6. A little interesting side story that came out of the Warriors earlier this year, a few months ago, maybe just a couple of weeks ago actually, was on Simon Mannering. He was the captain up until just this year. He's actually handing over the reins to Ryan Hoffman. I actually caught up with Simon earlier today out at Mount Smart Stadium.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be good for someone else to have the job. I wouldn't change anything I'd do for the club. Just less commitment, which is what I was sort of looking for a little bit. I've got a young family, so a bit more time with them, and looking forward to, I guess, putting that to one side and being able to concentrate on my footy a bit more.
You've got the first game in quite a while where you're not captain for the Warriors against the Wests. Are you expecting your role at all to change for the team?
I guess not football-wise and all that, not really. No, I won't obviously leave the boys out or have to do the other ref stuff and all that. So Ryan's going to do a great job there. I can just sort of worry about supporting him and try and play some good footy for the team.
Yeah. What sort of, I suppose, do you expect your role to be this season now that you've handed over the captaincy? You'll still be a big ball runner, I imagine?
Yeah, I don't know too much of a big ball runner, but I guess everyone's got a role on the side and just try and obviously you have your meetings with your coach each week and talk to him what he wants out of you each week, but just try and work as hard as you can out there for the team. I guess early rounds, it's pretty. Everyone's still sort of finding combinations and sometimes it can be hard going. So for us, definitely focus on some fundamental skill and just the basics of the game and try to do those as best as we can.
So that was Simon Mannering, the now former captain of the Warriors, still part of the team.
How many games has he played for the team, Matt? Rough as 100, 150?
Yeah, it's high hundreds. Yeah, I think he's a real stalwart of the team. But you're just so very clear, they've got the Warriors' first game of the NRL season this Saturday against the West Tigers in Sydney. It's at about 7 or 9 o'clock, I think, here in New Zealand time.
Okay, a more immediate trans-Tasman clash coming up tonight. The Breakers are playing in Perth in the first of the best of 3 NBL finals.
National Basketball League. So the Breakers, they've made the final yet again.
Incredible.
Since 2010, the 2 teams that are playing in this final have won every title. So the last 6 times, the Breakers have won 4 of them, the Perth have won 2. So these 2 teams are, the 2 greatest teams of the last few years. So people sometimes get a little bit bored between this rivalry that they have, but it is one that's been going on for a while now, and they have proven that they are the 2 best teams in the league. So the Breakers, I think, each time they've played each other at home, they've won. So like when the Breakers played in New Zealand, the Breakers won. When Perth played in Perth, Perth won. Perth have played the Breakers twice in Perth and won both games this season.
So if it's a best of 3 series and Perth have 2 games there, then they have distinct home advantage.
They do indeed. So the first game tonight, 11:30. Then the boys actually jump on the plane straight after the game, fly to New Zealand, get to New Zealand at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday time.
Nuts.
And then they've play on Friday. And then if they go to a decider, if it's 1-1 after the first 2, they go back to Perth for another match on Sunday. So a lot of travel time.
Can you imagine rugby players doing that? The answer is absolutely not.
That is no.
No way. If people wanted to go to the game in Auckland, too bad. The tickets went on sale at 2 o'clock.
We were just taking a look at them. They were sold out within 1 minute. So it's at North Shore Event Centre on Friday. But unfortunately, yes, tickets have already sold out. So people will have to watch it on Sky if they haven't already got tickets to the game.
Matt Chatterton, our Auckland sports reporter. We're going to end tonight with Dr. Ranginui Walker, now lying at Orake Marae in Auckland. The noted Māori academic was escorted onto the marae by his iwi family, academic colleagues, students. More than 1,000 people turned up there today to pay their respects, and our Māori issues correspondent, Mihi Narangi Forbes, was one of them.
They came in their hundreds, professors and politicians, iwi leaders, kaumātua kuia and school children. Inside the wharenui, they wailed, they cried, they laughed, and they remembered a chief, fondly remembered by iwi across the country. Ngāpuhi leader Hone Sadler shared the love of education.
His tongue was sharp as a sword, and he didn't mind using it, because if there was something good or right that'll come out of the conversation, he was prepared. He wasn't somebody who will hold back.
Former Māori Party leader Peter Sharples was a student, and Ranginui was his tutor when they first met.
I think his greatest gift was to be able to explain the ahua, the sort of what it was like to be colonised, and the actual things that colonised us. the events, the laws, the practices, the culture of tauiwi.
Throughout the speeches, a picture of a man who transcended many boundaries, but always had time for everyone. Activist Hilda Harawira remembers the early days.
We used to criticise him for being an academic, but I think it was of value to the protest movement that there was someone outside of the protest who wasn't involved, and that he could give a cultural context to why protest was happening.
New Zealand First leader Winston Peters told the crowd of around 1,000 that the Walkers and the Peters had been friends for a long time.
But Runga came up there in 1961 and got a badge and a handshake from my father, which we've honoured and they've honoured ever since. He was an extraordinarily good tenant, but tenant wasn't really the honest way of describing it. He became a very good friend of my father. And I suppose it's an old Maori respect thing. Whenever he caught fish, Dad had fish. And not just fish, it was filleted fish in the whole 100 yards, and best of stuff, and crayfish and stuff like that.
The Māori king, Kingitu Heitia, is currently being welcomed, and more groups are waiting at the gates for a tangihanga, which is shaping up to be one of the largest orake have hosted in years. For Checkpoint, this is Mihingarangi Forbes.
What a lovely way to end our program this evening. That is Checkpoint. Thank you for being with us, whether you were watching or listening. We are delighted to have your company. We hope you can join us tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. Until then, a very good evening indeed.
Listening to RNZ National, where it's 6:30. Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, a Super Tuesday for Trump and Clinton for America's top job. The International Criminal Court's first cultural destruction trial, and Germany's High Court considers banning a far-right political party. Those stories and more in World Watch PM. But first tonight, the United Nations Refugee Agency says that European Union governments are contributing to the migrant crisis by failing to adopt a unified approach. Refugees are stuck along the route from Greece to northern European countries. Aid agencies have called it a major humanitarian disaster. Macedonia hasn't let anyone cross its border from Greece,